Cabrini in Littleton. Are you awake right now? Where are you people? So my brother Steve is the youth minister of our home parish, which is kind of crazy. So I want my brother to stand up. He's way over there. Steve Nepil, there he is. I can't tell you how crazy it is that we're adults, and he's still kind of immature. But, we're both basically responsible for other human beings right now, which is crazy. His wife, Meg, is going to have a baby in 2 months. It's like, what the heck? How did this happen? So we're very excited, yeah. Steve is the most special person I've ever met in my life, and I mean special in that sense. Our favorite game in high school was to go camping. And we would send our friends, we'd put sleeping bags on them upside down, and we'd run them into this valley. And we'd take out potato guns, and we'd fire potatoes at these running sleeping bags. And so if you meet my brother and you're like, he's a little different, it's just one or two too many potatoes to the face, Sleeping bags don't provide that much stuff. But Steve is also the most competitive human being I've ever met, with the exception of myself. And the reason I don't have a voice right now is because I discovered this game called Spike Ball about 10 days ago. Has anybody here played Spike Ball? Yes. One guy out of 3,000 plays Spike Ball. The rest of you totally suck. You are amazing. This game is like the greatest game I've ever discovered in my life. So you're not living a real life until you know Spike Ball, except that guy, right? Everybody needs to get to know him before he leaves. So I apologize. I don't have a voice. I've been yelling at people playing Spike Ball, which I hope you all get to experience. So, to the homily. Today, I want to share with you a story of somebody who sat in your seats in this conference center 13 years ago. 13 years ago, right? Some of you were still babies back in the day, right? These conferences have been going on for a while. But this is a very interesting story. This is a really good story, right? So I want to share it with you. 13 years, go back. It was this week 13 years ago. This guy got forced to go on a retreat. Typical high school dude, all right? A little bit selfish, pretty prideful, did not want to be hanging out with church kids for an entire weekend. So why was he here? His parents paid him off. See, he got in a little bit of trouble, owed him $500, and they said, all debts forgiven. We'll pay you off $500 if you go for this weekend. He's doing the math. He's thinking, hourly rate, 36 hours on a retreat, $500, absolutely. So the reason he came to this was not because he wanted to have an experience with Christ, not because he liked the community, he liked the youth group, he liked the youth leader. No, it's purely for money. He came solely to make $500, okay? Now, I don't know if there's any of you like that right now. You don't have to stand up, right? We're not going to make you, manifest that. But that's a pretty pathetic reason to go on a conference, to make money. But God works with really pathetic reasons and really pathetic people, okay? So this guy is going into his senior year in high school. He's paid off to come to a Steubenville, the Rockies conference. He sits in to this thing, and he hates every second of it. By the end of the night on Friday night, he's thinking to himself, this isn't worth $500. This is not worth it. Maybe $1,000, not worth $500. This is a waste of my time because the Catholic Church has nothing to say to my life. That's what he said. Nothing to say to my life. And faith will do nothing except bound my freedom, my autonomous teenage freedom. And I could be partying this weekend, and I'm stuck here with a bunch of church kids, okay? This is what he's saying to us. Saturday morning, he gets up. And what does he do? Small group time. And he decides, I'm going to totally annihilate this small group, right? I'm smarter than this small group leader, and I'm just going to destroy every argument the Catholic Church has behind all of her irrational claims to truth. And so he goes after this poor mom who is a small group leader, right? And what happens? She takes him to task, right? She shows him up. He thought he was so smart. He thought he had all the answers. This kid starts going after about every controversial teaching the Catholic Church has. And what does this poor small group homeschool mom do? She wipes him out, right? She's smarter, she's faster, she knows her apologetics, she knows her scripture verses, and she reduces him to nothing. And what does he say? Humility starts to set in. He starts to say, wait a second. Maybe I don't know everything about everything. Maybe I don't know the answers. Maybe I don't even know what my Catholic faith is. Maybe I never actually knew what I was talking about. Maybe the media has been telling me more about what it means to be Catholic than I've learned in homilies or in religious education. And he's humbled. And and he's thrown off his horse, and he steps back, and he starts to realize something. He starts to realize this, that there is something palpable, something that he is experiencing, something that he is seeing but not sharing in this Steubenville Rockies conference. And that experience is something called joy. What is the mark of the Christian? It's joy. And what spoke to that kid 13 years ago was the joyful witness of people who were free. High school kids who were free because they knew Jesus. And that experience for him crushed him. It was the final humiliation, the final blow. Not only had he been annihilated intellectually by this homeschool small group leader, mom, okay? But then he realizes everybody in this room, thousands of high school kids, are experiencing something he's never experienced in his life. And you call that Christian joy. He says to himself, I have everything. I have girls, I have sports, right? Captain of whatever sport he was playing. I have friends. I don't need this. I don't need Christ. But something's different. And other people have something that I don't have. And in fact, it's not only something, it's the most important thing. Nothing else matters unless we experience joy in life. See, he had worldly happiness, but he didn't have Christian joy. And worldly happiness doesn't satisfy. So what happens? What does he do next? It's about 1 o'clock on Saturday. He says, I'm out of here, right? He leaves the conference. He starts walking away. But he doesn't get very far because he realizes he doesn't have a car, okay? So he gets about 200 yards outside, and he's like, I didn't really think this through. So he sits down outside. Right outside that parking lot. I could show you the spot where this happened to this kid. Right outside. And he sits down, and he's sitting there, and he's looking at the clouds, and he's minding his own business, but he's thinking about his life. He is processing, right, the fact that he just got annihilated intellectually, the fact that he has no joy, the fact that basically everything he has lived for is crumbling. And he's all dealing with that, sitting in the parking lot outside of this very room. And what happens? A priest comes out and talks to him. And he looks to his right and he goes, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe a priest is going to come talk to me, right? This is the worst thing possible. He's going to make me drink that Catholic Kool-Aid stuff, whatever it is, right? So the priest comes next to him. He sits next to him. And what does he do? He doesn't judge him. He doesn't try and fix him. He doesn't try and tell him Catholic things. He just sits with him. He is with him. He just abides. And he talks to the priest for the next couple hours outside in that very parking lot. And what does the priest do? He listens. He hears him out. He talks through things. He encourages him. And then he says the key phrase. Your life will be better with confession. And the kid says, absolutely not. There is no way in hell I'm going to confession. He says, trust me. Your life will be better with confession. So when this happened 13 years ago, the confessional was down at the end here. He walks back in with the priest. He goes in. He experiences the most important, definitive confession of his life. And he walks out of that confessional. He's never seen that priest ever since. He's never seen him since. The most important person he has ever met in his life. He doesn't even know his name. He can't even thank him. The priest did his job. He stepped. He was with him. He brought him to Christ in the confessional. And he experienced confession. And he was free. And that joy in Christ, which comes from freedom, he experienced for the first time. He walked back into this very room 13 years ago, and something called Eucharistic adoration was beginning. He had no idea what adoration was. He didn't even know how to pray, but he knelt down, and as the Blessed Sacrament passed him, he saw something. He saw a vision. He saw a vision of Jesus Christ coming to him, showing him something in the future. It wouldn't make sense to him then. It would make sense to him years later. But he encountered Jesus, the person, the second person of the Trinity. And he knew in his heart, this is true. And if this is true, it's worth giving everything for. Nothing stops. I hold nothing back. I give everything for Christ. And that moment was the definitive moment of his life. The next morning he got up. The vocation director called forward the men who desired or were discerning vocation of priesthood. He did something crazy. He went forward. He stood up and he said, maybe I'm called to be a priest. He'd been a Christian for like 12 hours, right? And he was like, let's do this, right? A year later, he did something crazier. He went to seminary. 9 years later, he got ordained, and that man stands before you today. I am him. God is real. He's real. He's real and he's working. God is working. He's providential. He's in your life. There is no one in this room right now who was further from Christ than I was 13 years ago. There is no one in this room who could possibly have more sin in their life, right? If you're afraid to go to confession, I guarantee it's not as bad as the one I made 13 years ago back then. And if the priest didn't judge me, he's not going to judge you today. There is no one further from Christ in this room. I don't care who you are. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how prideful you are. I don't care if you're enslaved to sex, to lust, to pornography. It doesn't matter. Christ crushed all of my slavery in a second. In a second, he changed my life. And I've been reeling from that fact for 13 years. I have literally been astounded for 13 years. I cannot believe it happened. Why did you choose me? Why did you give me that grace? A stupid, prideful kid who came on this retreat for money, and everything changed. That's what it's about. This is a God who goes after the lost sheep. He's a God who will seek you to the end of your life. He will never stop pursuing you. He will always choose you. He will always seek you. There is nothing you can do to separate yourself from him. And the most astonishing thing is if you can get through high school, if you can be faithful through college, your life will be so much more better. It will be so much more blessed. I promise you, there is nothing greater in this life than Jesus Christ. There are so many of us who are so bored, right? We don't want any of this. We don't want to talk about it. We don't desire faith. We sure as hell don't want to live it in our high schools. But there is nothing more beautiful. There is nothing more profound, and there is nothing more unbelievable. I want you to experience what I experienced. I want you to know of his love. I want you to know what Christian friendship is like. The beauty of silence, the beauty of prayer. It's all yours. Everything is yours. That priest, 13 years ago, has no idea that I became a Catholic priest. He has no idea who I am. I was just some lost kid outside of this conference center who went to confession. I pray that today these priests will experience the same thing. That you come to them and they never see you again. But someday in heaven we're reunited and everything comes together. Everything is exposed. Everything makes sense. Everything is manifested. And we rejoice for all eternity together. When I was in that conference 13 years ago, what I saw was I thought a vision of heaven. I thought I saw myself entering into heaven. But 3 years ago, that vision came to fulfillment. I was processing in at my first Mass. My first Mass as a Catholic priest. And it was the exact same thing I had seen 10 years before. I was processing in to the heavenly Jerusalem. It was an experience of heaven. And it was with everybody that I loved. And it was with the God who created us, who is calling us back to himself. Today, this morning, we enter into that heaven. This Holy Eucharist, the greatest gift, but the most hidden gift in this life, it is ours. God has given it to us. The greatest joy in my life is the celebration of this Eucharist, and it's the same for these men. And so as we close this homily, I want to show you a video that recapitulates the story I just told you, but especially shows a very important Mass to me personally.